As we're getting started, working with boundaries and barriers, we're looking at our personal relationships with people, of course, as well as our own internal state of emotional groundedness, distress. There's a lot riding on this. These are always high stakes. And some people that we are more peripheral with, we could maybe even practice some boundaries with. But most of the time when we're looking at boundaries, there's a relationship of some importance to us. The ones that are family or partners or really close friends are higher stakes, of course. Sometimes with colleagues, though, or a boss, we still need to set boundaries or barriers that can still be high stakes in terms of our livelihood and our career. And so that's also something that we're working with here as well. So this is a resource that a friend turned me on to that I really like her work. She's on Instagram, very popular there. Dr. Glover Tawwab has this great book called Set Boundaries and Find Peace. And I think you'd find a lot of really good ideas. The first couple of pages of this presentation are out of some of what she shares. So she talks about healthy boundaries in order to find balance and to cope with people that aren't maybe very good for us. And why would we do that? Well, the reason would be so that we can enjoy more rewarding relationships. And that's probably one of the things that's the most important reason why we would do this. It's to protect ourselves, but it's also so that we can create an environment where we're real and authentic and sharing. And for me, having gone into freeze a lot of my life, and a lot of the times when I was feeling unprotected or under threat in a relationship, I go into freeze. What I really discovered was that kills the relationship just as much as going into fight or something else, because there's no one there to have a relationship. I'm not really showing up in the relationship. So being able to express our needs and be in an honest, authentic relationship is critical in order to enjoy relationships or to have healthy relationships at all. So one of the reasons, some of the reasons she talks about is to communicate what's acceptable and not acceptable to us, to communicate our needs, and also to create clarity, because if we're not good at setting boundaries and we're not good at saying what's going on, oftentimes we're expecting people to read our mind, and people don't usually do a very good job of that. So creating clarity about what we want and what we're wanting in a relationship is really helpful. And this kind of refers back to what I was just saying. We can have a healthy vulnerability with people who've earned our trust, but not be sharing inappropriately with people who haven't. So to be able to have that clarity and really see this person I can trust, this person I don't know yet, and this person I know for sure I can't. So to have that clarity requires us to be really present and be willing to see and be able to see what's really going on, to be comfortable saying no. And one of the things that I know through experience, and I know many of us do, is that when someone says no to us, it's often not personal to us. It's something going on with them. And there might be something personal in terms of our behavior or something like that, but it's often not personal in the way we take it. So if we have core deficiency beliefs or an anxiety, or we're really lonely or something like that, we can not be very grounded. So we're not coming from a position of strength, maybe. So determining what we want is a good self-care practice, and it goes way beyond having a hot bath and with candles and nice music, although that's really a wonderful way to calm down too. But we can actually set boundaries in a way that we safeguard our time, we don't overextend ourselves, and that we start to spend our time and our energy with people who we really enjoy, as we move some of those other people and some of those relationships to the side if they're not really nourishing us. We tend to raise the bar for what we want in relationships. So this quote we looked at last week too with Dr. Kay Vogt. In a healthy relationship, both people act like adults. They take equal responsibility for their emotional reactions and talk things out rather than acting things out. Wow, there's a lot there in that quote. If we were to just take that on, taking responsibility for our emotional reactions, talk things out. That requires a high degree of emotional maturity and safety. And so that's something that we work towards in a relationship where we can feel safe and equal and where we're really interested in the other person. So what gets in the way of that is being emotionally unregulated. That could be that we're going into fight, flight, freeze, fawn. That's really one of the barriers. Those survival responses are a barrier to authentic, deep connection. And people aren't able to honor boundaries when we're in that. There's also the issue of being emotionally flooded. So if we have reached a point where we're kind of overloaded or overwhelmed or emotionally flooded, it takes about 20 minutes for our brain to release or let go of that surge of cortisol and adrenaline that comes through the brain. During that time, we don't really have access to our thinking brain, our higher level consciousness. So one of the really important things to do is to be able to recognize when we're getting flooded and to take a break. So to stop a conversation and to say, right now, I really need to take a break. I'm not feeling very rational at the moment, or I need to clear my head. I'm going to go for a walk for 20 minutes. Let's come back to the conversation after that. And a lot of the problems that happen when we're flooded happen because we're in fight, flight, or freeze, or fawn, and we're not able to get out of it. So if we can notice through our own mindfulness practices, right now I'm feeling enraged. I'm going to say some things I don't want to say if I keep going with this. The other thing that she talks about, Dr. Vogt talks about, is that we need to manage our anxiety so that we can tolerate saying and listening to challenging information. So that's all of us all the time, is to be able to use our breathing, use the tapping, put your hands on your heart, hold your hand, all of those things, or some of those, like 5 things I can see, 4 things I can touch. Those practices that are on the emergency practices page on my website, and all of the other ones like that are down regulating to our nervous system, are really important to practice in order to have that stability and that emotional groundedness. So I wanted to take a moment here and just reflect on that last part on the page. I am me, and you are you. I'm not you, you're not me. And I commit to an equal adult relationship with you. So if you bring someone to mind, and if you say that to yourself, I commit to an equal adult relationship with you, notice what's here. It might be, I don't know if they're able to do that. I don't know if I want to do that. Or, yeah, of course. Just notice what came up for you there. Merging with people sometimes happens with a trauma bond and other reasons, isn't very healthy in an adult relationship. We need to have a sense of where I start and end, and where you end and start, and how we can have 2 people or more if there's more, but how we can have a relationship with each other and not be kind of merged. So before we go into the inquiry, this practice is from my meditation teacher, and he would ask us to solve the problem they have with you. So let's go kind of slowly through this. So if you were to bring to mind a relationship that has a problem, maybe where you're thinking about boundaries or maybe barriers too. So bring to mind a relationship probably with one other person, but however that shows up. And how would they state the problem? You don't have to agree with it. Your mind might try to kind of answer it back, but just from their perspective, as unreasonable as that might be, what would they say is the problem? And notice your breath, notice your body, stay grounded. And then look to see if this is a situation where it's helpful or possible even to surrender one half of your ground to find a middle ground. And it may or may not be. There are some things that we're not willing to compromise on for lots of different reasons. But just notice how you would state the problem and how they would state the problem. And is this the kind of situation where you could find a middle ground? And if it doesn't feel like that's an option here, and one of the immediate examples that comes to mind is vaccinations. One of my family members, one of my siblings, is not going to have a vaccination probably. And our views are very different about it. And can I honor that person? So just to sit with that for a minute, whatever your situation is, can you honor that they have their own point of view, whether you think it's right or wrong? You may even feel that it's not safe. Their point of view is that I should get to drink as much as I want. And your point of view is no, that's not safe. They drink or whatever it is, they drive. So just sit with that for a moment. Can you honor the right of that other person to have that point of view? And maybe right isn't even the right word. You just honor as a person that they have that point of view. And your mind is probably going to come in with some reasoning about that, and that's fine. This person has a different point of view. That's how it is. It doesn't mean it's right or wrong, it just means they have a different point of view. And then if you want, you could also look at how much of your point of view is due to safety concerns or wanting them to be a certain way or to value what you value. Are you kind of in their business a little bit more than you should? And if you are, that's completely natural. We all have heart emotional connections and we want things for people. Just to look and see how much of it is that you're worried about their safety and how much of it is you want them to be a different way. Keep noticing your breath. Notice your body. If you need to back away, just back away. You could look around the room, hold your hand, do those things that are grounding. And then the last question to bring into the inquiry that we're going to go into now, can you say the unpleasant in a pleasant way? So in other words, can you not shame them? So these are some examples, this page and the next page, of different ways we might put our boundaries into words. And to acknowledge at the beginning that sometimes people keep crossing your boundaries and you might need a barrier. Often a barrier has to do with access. Sometimes it has to do with timing of access. I'll see you during the day, but not in the evening. I will talk on the phone, but I don't want to get together right now. I know that with COVID, everybody's thinking it's time to get back together in person, but I'm not really comfortable. There's a lot of different ways that we could do this. And barriers aren't like jail necessarily. You can still have some contact, but it might not be what they want. So I'm going to just read through some of these wordings and you could close your eyes or you could read through them yourself and maybe pick one and kind of sit with it. Imagine that you're saying that to them. Please respect my decision. Call before you stop by. This is what is healthy for me. And these next ones are a little bit more clear, maybe a little bit more escalated. I don't feel comfortable sharing with you because you tend to tell me what's best for me instead of listening. If we were to say that to somebody, they would maybe argue back, no, that's not true. So you might not get a very open response to that. And when you have a disagreement with me, I'd like you to use a lower tone and take a break if you're getting heated. And I'll also keep track of that, and I'll tell you too when I'm starting to feel uncomfortable. If I feel like you're starting to get emotionally flooded, or I am, I'll call a halt. Say, time out. Your voice is getting really loud. I'm starting to pull back. And this is a really clear. When you were at my house, you were drunk and rude. So you're just naming what happened. If that happens in the future, I will ask you to leave. So a clear boundary. I will not be around you when you drink. That would be difficult to tell somebody that. And it also might be extremely important to have that kind of a boundary with somebody. And some people who are not too close in, we would just kind of let them go and move on to other friends, other people, especially if it's family. It might be something that we really are reluctant to do. I feel like you're not interested in me. I need equal airtime when we talk. And I know some people who tend to take up more of the space. I tend to listen to them. They tend to talk. And that's not very satisfying long term. Or I find myself shutting down when you look at me that way and use that shaming tone of voice. Could you say it another way? The Gottman Institute are pretty famous for this too, is to talk about when someone feels contempt for their partner, that's a real indicator that the relationship is in serious trouble. So that look is often a look of contempt that we respond to. Or when somebody is shaming us, we try to get away from that. It's very difficult for us to be with that. So to name it, again, we're naming what's happening from our perspective. Our relationship as it is now doesn't work for me. I'd like to work this out, though. I want to be authentic. I want to stay connected. So someone may or may not be able to really hear that if we're talking about other things like boundaries and different things. But if that is your heart's, that's what you feel in your heart, then it's important to get that out there too. I'm allowed to have privacy. Please don't pressure me to share what I'm not comfortable with. And I understand that you don't like my boundary. Setting this limit helps me feel safer in our relationship. So when we think about that, one of the things that comes up is that we have a equal right to determine the tone and the boundaries and the connection in any relationship. It's not up to one person to say this is how it's going to be. We get a say too. And how can we set those boundaries in a way that's opening as much possibility as there is for connection, but where we get our needs met too. We don't have to give ourselves away in order to be in a good relationship. And then to really sit with this for a minute. So if you wanted to close your eyes, as you consider everything about this relationship and their capacity to, what might you come to as a decision, and to acknowledge that there's no right or wrong decision here. Lots of times we'll give somebody a lot of leeway that we wouldn't give somebody else. And because maybe we recognize that their capacity isn't what we would want in a different kind of relationship, but that's what we have that we're dealing with. And we care about them and we want them to stay close. So we can balance protection and keeping an open heart. And sometimes it's a little hard line when other people get involved or might have something to say about the relationship. There was a real movement around tough love for a while, especially with alcohol and addiction to drugs, people not wanting to be codependent or to enable And sometimes that tough love actually pushed them right away and wasn't necessarily the right thing. So we have to take responsibility for our decisions, for our relationships. And there isn't a perfect decision when it comes to relationships. So to take a couple of deep breaths, let your body settle again, be grounded. Now you could pick someone here for this inquiry. We're going to spend 2 or 3 minutes on this. You might pick a lower stakes person, or you might pick someone that's coming to mind. But bring up an image of someone where you're wanting to set a boundary and imagine what words you might say to them. So it might be something from one of the previous slides. You might have made a note or a mental note of that. Please respect my decision. This is what I need, whatever it might be. And then as you're stating the boundary to them, either close your eyes or let your gaze be soft and notice what happens in your body. See if you can stay regulated. Notice your feet on the floor. Notice your breath. And if you're starting to get a bit dysregulated, remind yourself that you don't need their approval. We're adults. Some things are very difficult. And as an adult, we get to set the tone in our relationship. I can handle their hurt feelings. It's not to say I enjoy it or it's easy. Just remember to breathe, stay grounded. And you could kind of walk through it in your mind, whatever the words are that you're saying, and kind of see yourself or hear yourself saying those words. Notice if they're responding the way you think they might respond. What's your reactivity in your body to that? Are you holding your breath a little bit? Are you arguing in your mind? And you can come down to something very clear. I understand you don't like my boundary. For right now, this is what I want to do. This is what feels right to me. I want to stay connected. And in order to do that, this is my thoughts on how that's going to be. This is the boundary that I'm setting. Let yourself really feel into that. So in a couple of minutes, we're going to come back together as a group. In the meantime, just stay with the inquiry. Notice what you feel like. You might just want to let all of the thoughts go and rest in your heart center. You might want to come back from it altogether and let the inquiry finish. And notice what your reactions and responses were as we went through all the different slides, the different inquiries. What is it that you'd like to bring forward in terms of how you're handling things in your life? And also in terms of what you'd like to share with the group, if you want to share with words. But stay really connected with your body and breath as you do that. All right. And then when you're ready, come back.